Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey with Nicole and Azan. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a couples therapist, and I'm also a professor. As I always say in these shows, I cannot diagnose from afar. Everything I'm saying about these individuals is based on limited information that the producers of the show are showing us and that the people that are on the show are choosing to show the cameras. All that should be taken into consideration as I talk about this TV show.
I know you're still upset, but it's really close to me leaving, and I don't want to leave, in bad terms. He keeps ignoring me, and it makes me really upset because I really just want to talk to him.
So my running hypothesis, I have no idea, it's total speculation, is that she exhibits preoccupied attachment, he exhibits avoidant attachment. I've talked about this in previous episodes, but just in a nutshell, when we're young and we're not being attuned to enough as children at 1 year old, 2 years old, attunement meaning that your parents, your caregivers notice your emotional state, notice what's going on for you, and then respond in a way that teaches the young child that I'm worthy as a human being and people can be depended on, and that I know what my emotions are and my emotions are okay. And that generally speaking, I can trust other people. If you're not attuned to enough at the age of 1, 2, 3 years old, then you emerge with some way of coping with the fact that you weren't attuned to enough. And two of the various different styles of coping are preoccupied and avoidant. There are other names for it, but those are the words that I use to try to stay consistent with the language. So avoidant, sometimes they call it dismissive. Preoccupied, sometimes they call anxious. So with preoccupied people, the way that they dealt with the lack of attunement is to lean in and chase and demand and to cling to people. And to the avoidant people, they learned to cope with the lack of attunement by just shutting down, turning away, convincing the self that they don't need other people and that they're fine, even though they are not fine. Both people, avoidant and preoccupied, underneath their coping style is a vast sea of unmet needs from the past and from the present. And both people do not trust other people. They just have different ways of coping with it. The preoccupied person, when they don't trust, is they demand the other person reassure them often. To the avoidant person, what they do to deal with the lack of trust is they just give up. They just turn away from relationships. And often in conversations, the preoccupied person will be the one talking a lot, and then the avoidant person will be the one who will be shutting down. The preoccupied person will exhibit emotion because they learned that if they exhibit emotion and a lot of emotion, then they finally get people to pay attention to them. To the avoidant person, they gave up on people a long time ago. So one, why express your emotions? And two, why even know your emotions? And three, why even acknowledge your own emotions? Because if no one's going to care about your emotions, then it's best to just not even be aware of your emotions. So a lot of avoidant people will actually cut themselves off from their body, which is where all of our emotional cues usually come from, or a lot of our emotional cues. So when you ask avoidant people, how do they feel? They're like, I don't feel anything. When you ask avoidant people, do you care? They'll often say, no, I don't care. When in reality, they really do care often. It's just that they think they don't care, or they want to believe that they don't care because the fantasy is that they don't need other people because they concluded a long time ago that they can't depend on other people. So why need other people if no one's ever going to be there for you? So in this instance, we see some evidence for that hypothesis. She's the one doing the talking. She's the one turning to him. He's saying, I don't want to talk. He's not saying anything. He seems unemotional. So let's see how this plays out.
Not only is he having a hard time trusting me still because of what I did, cheating and stuff, but now it's I'm scared that he's not gonna get over this. Yesterday, I really wanted to go home because I didn't know what to do because I felt alone and I didn't know who to talk to or where to go. I don't like that I'm here and that's what's happening. That's not why I came here.
So the other topic that I'm sure the two of them, at least him, that at least he is thinking about, is the fact that she put hands on. She was physically abusive and coercive I believe it must have been yesterday. I'm not sure if this is the second day or the same day. It sounds like it was yesterday, the big fight. And a lot of apologizing has to happen here from Nicole. She should apologize and recognize that what she did was immoral, wrong in a multitude of ways, and that trust that he was trying to build, his trust was harmed when she cheated on him 1.5 times. One time when she actually did get together with someone while they were together. He broke up with her. She begged him to come back and even kind of used her daughter, in the video messaging saying like, call him daddy. And then that sucked him back in, according to his narrative. He let her back in. They met in Morocco. She went back to the United States. And then, according to her, she went out with a guy, one-on-one, and she took off her wedding ring before she went out with this guy. He found out about it. Azan found out about it. So I'm counting that as like a half infidelity. You could say it's a full infidelity moment, but I'm saying it 1.5 just because that's just how I'm framing it. So that trust was broken for him. And now we have another trust that was broken, which is she put hands on and denied him his physical right to his body and to his ability to go somewhere that he wants to go. He just wanted to get away from her for good reason. I mean, the way that she treated him. And then it was multiple incidents. It wasn't just one incident of flashbang, enraged behavior. It was a number of behaviors over a span of time. Now, she was distressed in the moment, but we wouldn't look at that behavior and say that it was an anomaly. It was something that it seems as though she feels entitled to. And that's often the key when it comes to intimate partner violence, is that perpetrators will feel entitled to put hands on. They feel like it's their right to put hands on. They feel like they're entitled to controlling someone else, that what they want better be followed or else. And they're going to make sure that they get what they want, sometimes with their physicality, sometimes with intimidation, sometimes with threats, sometimes with just terrorizing the other person in general. So that's what she was doing. Make no doubt about it, she was abusive in that moment. And I don't know what's going on in his mind right now. I'm suspecting that he is sufficiently hurt by multiple different things, including the ongoing conflicts that they've been having, that he is going to his safe space, which is with a ton of walls up. And you can just kind of see that in his face. So there's a lot of apologizing that needs to happen. Let's see if they can do it.
And like, when I just asked you to come talk with me, you didn't.
I know that if I kept talking to you this way, it would be more.
It became like that because you didn't come talk to me.
So as I said in a previous episode, that is a classic preoccupied avoidant conversation. Preoccupied avoidant configurations, they always have this conversation, I would suspect. Azan, and I even said this, I bet you Azan feels like he is separate, because Azan, they were fighting and Azan wanted to get away. He just wanted to separate himself. And almost all the time when I talk to the avoidant Azans of the world, they will say, well, the reason why I was trying to get away wasn't to punish her. I was trying to get away because if I stayed, it just would have made it worse. And the conflict was so bad and she was yelling and screaming so much that I just felt like I needed to get away, because I feel like she wasn't listening to me, and so what's the point in having this conversation? So the avoidant person actually there's pros and cons to preoccupied and avoidant. And one of the pros to being avoidant is that avoidant people often are able to separate from conflict. They're just like, there's no point in being in this conversation, I'm going away. The con is that they don't turn and say, I'm sorry, honey, I'm leaving because our conflict is just going to get worse if I stay. So let's talk about this later. So because of their inability to be vulnerable and to engage beyond their walls, they will not be very reassuring to their partner as a way of actually getting them to calm down so they won't chase them, which is what she did. She was triggered by him moving away, and he chased her, or she chased him. Then he says, well, the only reason why I was moving away is because the conflict was just going to get worse. Now, there's another reason why avoidant people often move away, which is a passive aggression. It's a message to the other person of, I know that you don't like it when I walk away, and I'm going to punish you by walking away. It's akin to slamming the door in someone's face. It's like you storm out of the room and you slam the door. Well, why are you slamming the door? Part of it might be to vent some anger, but another part of it is to send a message of, I don't like what you just did, okay? And to move away when he absolutely knows by now that she doesn't like it when he moves away is a message to her of, I don't like what you're doing, you really hurt my feelings. Now, to the other person, outside of the avoidant person, they don't usually take it that way. They don't usually take it as a message of, I was hurt and you're hurting me. They usually take it as, you're just denying me. You're just punishing me because that's how you are. You're a punishing person. So I don't know, but that's often another motivation is to passive aggressively communicate you're upset and to passively communicate that a request that you wish that they would stop doing X, Y, and Z. Now, her response to him is to say, well, I was only like that because of what you did. And it's a very insecure attachment thing to say, whether it's avoidant or preoccupied. Both insecure attachment styles tend to blame other people, especially when they're being triggered. There's a lot of different conceptualizations of this. One is that because of the lack of attunement early in life, they don't really have connection with who they are, and they can't really suss out what's happening. And they're not really as adept at being able to mentalize, being able to read other people's minds, not actual ESP, but pick up on cues and go, oh, I bet you I know what's going on in their mind. Even though it's very different from what's going on in my mind, I can imagine another mind outside of me. When you lack attunement from your parents, you actually have an underdeveloped sense of mentalization, underdeveloped sense of sensing someone's ego state. So there's that reason. The other reason that people will deny and say, well, I only did that because of you, is this weird defense that doesn't make any logical sense, and I've talked about this before, of if I convince right now he's accusing her of the only reason why I moved away is because the conflict was escalating. He's not even really blaming her, but she's probably taking it as blame. And so there's this fantasy, this defense that kicks in people's minds of, okay, if I convince Azan that he's wrong and that, no, it has nothing to do with me, you were the problem, then I will be pure and I will not be to blame, and then he'll want to be with me because I'm pure and I am not to blame. I didn't do anything wrong. And if I beat him up in this conversation and make him understand that I didn't make a mistake, and by default he was the one that made a mistake, then I'll be a good person and he'll want to be with me. Of course, that doesn't make any sense, because to ridicule someone else and to force your idea into someone's head, one, it's not going to work, and two, it's not going to feel good. So it doesn't work that way, right? To try to win an argument by convincing the other person that the only reason why things happened was because of you, it's not because of me, is shooting yourself in the foot. So let's see if she can walk that back a little bit. Now, before moving on, to be clear, I'm not saying that she was to blame for the conflict in general. They're both to blame for the conflict. I'm quite sure of it. She is 100% to blame for the physical violence and the abuse of control that she exhibited on his body. She's 100% responsible for that, and she's 100% to blame for that. She didn't have to do that. She's got to work on that. And they're both responsible for the conflict that led up to that.
I didn't want to talk to her because I know that if I keep talking to her, it will be the problem will be bigger. And also, when I'm mad, I only think, I think that about cheating, I always think. I know that happened for a long time, but anyway, I keep thinking about it.
So as I've been saying in previous videos, when it comes to infidelity recovery, it takes a long time. I think for Azan, the first incident of cheating, he learned about, I think, maybe 6 months ago or something. So he's had 6 to 12 months or so of recovery from that first major infidelity moment where she actually got together with someone else while the two of them were together. And then this half infidelity where she went out with a guy without her wedding ring is recent that he found out. And she lied about it in multiple different ways. At first she said, I just went out with girlfriends. And then at a later point during an interview on this TV show, she revealed that it was with a guy and that she took her ring off then. And her explanation for it, at least the explanations that we've been presented on this show that she's said in front of the cameras, is insufficient. She's just saying, I'm sorry, I love you, I'll never do it again. Okay, great, but why did you do it in the first place? Because they were engaged at that point. When she went out with that guy, then they were engaged. Now, I don't doubt that Nicole doesn't even know why she did it, because she has a lot of therapy ahead of her. And my main hypothesis, it's total speculation, for why she has this repetitive cheating behavior is because she has dependent personality traits, meaning that she has stunted development in terms of her understanding of herself and her responsibility to other people. As an analogy, one of the things that I would often run into in families was they would have a 10-year-old that would not do their homework, let's just say. The 10-year-old would be really nice when the parents and the teachers were around, but when the teachers and the parents weren't around, the homework wouldn't go in their bag, or the homework would just find its way into the garbage can, or they wouldn't do the homework, or the homework would get scrunched down and it would be unrecognizable. And the parents and the teachers would get really upset. They'd say, we gave you the homework to do, or we gave you the homework to turn in, and you just lost it. Why do you keep doing that to us? And upon assessment, sometimes I would find that the 10-year-old due to various different reasons, ADHD is one possibility, but another possibility is just lack of attunement and attachment issues early in life, such that unless they have very noticeable people in their lives telling them things, then it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. And that's sort of a child way of being. When you're a child, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. As we grow and mature and differentiate, we have the ability to retain ideas in our mind that aren't necessarily right in our face. For example, for me as an adult, I pay my bills. But when I get my bill in the mail, it's not immediately apparent why I need to pay it. And I'm looking at the bill and I'm like, crap, I got to pay this bill. That sucks. So I have this impulse to not pay it. Like, I don't want to pay that money. I want money to spend on other things like candy or whatever it is that we want to spend money on. But because I've matured and I'm not a child anymore, I say, well, even though it's not right in my face, if I don't pay this bill, X, Y, and Z will happen. And even though it won't happen right away, I have to recognize that in 3 months, or even my credit score, that, like when I have to buy a new car 5 years from now, like it'll affect that situation. So you have to retain a lot of future things in your mind to modify your current behavior, things that may or may not even happen, So as a child, we expect that. Children don't have that ability yet, right? Well, when you're treated very badly, or you're treated like you're a child and you're prevented from growing up, then, and I won't go into full explanation of dependent personality because it's very complicated, but that's one aspect of it. Then you also retain that childish point of view. And thus, when you're not around your spouse, then cheating, it just happens because Azan wasn't right there to help her to remember, that's right, if I take my wedding ring off and go out with this guy, Azan is going to be really hurt by that, and he might not want to get married to me, which is a big goal of mine. That's a lot of speculation. I mean, maybe Nicole doesn't even really like Azan. It certainly seems like she really likes Azan, right? So why would someone who really likes Azan so much risk it for some random guy in Florida taking off her ring and going on a date with him? Why would she have done that? There's other possibilities for sure: substance abuse, coercion. Maybe her family got into her head and said she should move on. I could see that being an option as well, which also would play into dependency. Not knowing what you want, being too influenceable by other people, and subtly resenting the fact that other people are influencing you so much. So, yeah. So he is having trouble trusting. Now she puts hands on. So he's going to have a really hard time trusting. And he's talking about this right here. Let's rewind it. But he was talking about how he's still recovering. He still is not really trusting her, and he's hurt. And that will affect the way that he comes across to her, which is a very vulnerable thing to do. And he is overcoming his walls to be able to tell that, or even to acknowledge that to himself and to say it to the cameras. So let's rewind that and watch it again.
I know that if I kept talking to you this way, it would be more.
It became like that because you didn't come talk to me.
I didn't want to talk to her because I know that if I keep like talking to her, it will be like the problem will be like bigger. And also, when I'm mad, I only think, I think that about cheating. I always think. I know that happened for a long time, but anyway, I keep thinking about it.
Right. So we have this notion in our society, maybe in Morocco as well, that you should talk about it for a little bit and then you should let it go, get over it, stop dwelling on the past. I get a lot of questions when people are on YouTube Live. They'll ask me, like, how do I get over this? How do I stop dwelling on this? And often the perspective that I have is that we have this notion in our culture that we should let go, that we should stop dwelling, that we should move on. And that if we aren't moving on, then there's something wrong with us. We're choosing to think about it. When it comes to infidelity recovery, almost always it takes years to recover. I've worked with couples for 10 years recovering from one incident of infidelity, and that's normal. Imagine that you get married to someone or you're engaged to someone and they cheat on you. That is hurtful. That is devastating. Because it's not just the cheating, which it sometimes can just be that, but it's way bigger than that. It throws everything into question. It throws into question, does this person really love me? When this person says anything to me, can I really believe it? When they say they haven't cheated on me in other instances, can I really trust them that they haven't cheated on me in other instances? Because if they did it once and they got caught, then that was probably just the tip of the iceberg. They've probably done other things or lesser things that they don't consider to be cheating, like flirting or online sexting or something. So it throws everything into question. And it also even throws into question, can I trust people in general? Because I love this person and I really trusted this person with my heart. And then they did this to me. So can people be even trusted? And so this is a massive problem, and it is often taking a long time to heal from. And so I hope that the two of them can actually spend the time to help both of them heal from it.
When I see that you can't respect me, when you push me in front of people, that's something it's really bad.
I know I was wrong, and especially since your aunt was around, and I really do feel stupid and, disrespectful to your aunt. She's been so good to us.
It's just I worried to go, for example, to America, and things like this kept going, I worry about that.
2 thumbs up to Azan. Perfect. Great. You are worried about it. It's rational to worry about it. And you're just that's owning your own feelings, expressing them, and not lacing it with a bunch of accusation, and then giving the other person a chance to take care of you. So great, Azan. Now, what we want from Nicole, if the two of them want to bond and to reduce conflict and to repair from the major conflicts they've been in, then right now Nicole needs to say something like, I understand why you're afraid. It makes sense to me that you're afraid. You should be afraid because of the things that have happened and the things that I've done. You're right to be afraid. I want to tell you that you don't have anything to worry about because I've dedicated myself to you and I'm never going to do it again. But of course you're afraid. I'd be afraid if I was in your shoes. So some validation, something along those lines. And then maybe some comment of, here's what I'm going to do to make sure I never do it again. Now, so far, Nicole has just said, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'm not going to do it again. The dependent person, that's their stance usually, is, well, if I just prove that I'm dedicated to the person, sort of verbally, the way a child proves to a parent, I love you so much, then I'll get them on my side and we can relax. But the dependent person, what they need to do is they need to do a full inventory of who they are, or at least somewhat of an inventory of who they are, which takes a lot of therapy, explorative therapy, exploration therapy, and getting to know who you are and using that secure attachment of the therapeutic relationship to actually grow and work through the feelings of dependency and anger and resentment, being able to express anger in a functional way. And so she would have to eventually get to a place where she could say, well, you know what? The reason why I cheated was because A, B, and C. And some of the things that I'll hear from dependent people after this process, because I've worked with dependent people who did cheat. Another word is passive-aggressive personality. You can listen to my full deep dive on that if you're a patron of the podcast. Eventually, I'm going to, and it's the passive-aggressive personality disorder episode, I don't know, it's several hours. Again, it's only for patrons, is also about dependent personality, so you can listen to that. But I've worked with clients before who have had that issue of dependent or passive-aggressive personality, and they did cheat. And they did, in the moment, not really feel like they're responsible for other people's feelings. They were also sometimes trying to express their anger in a hidden, passive way by cheating or by going out with someone else to subtly hurt the other person or to very much hurt the other person, which of course doesn't make any sense. It's like if you want to yell and scream at someone, go ahead and do that. Why would you cheat with someone as a way of getting back at someone? But we know people are capable of that kind of behavior, particularly if, as a young child, they were denied the ability to express their anger in an open way with their caregivers, and so they only can exhibit it through hidden ways, such as cheating. So the place that I get to with dependent people who are talking about past cheating that they've done in a passive-aggressive way or a dependent way is they eventually realize, wow, I've grown since then, and I was different then. And when I reflect back on who I was back then when I was cheating, I did not have a good moral compass. Not because I'm a bad person, but because I hadn't developed it yet, because I was basically immature. I was walking around like I was an adult, but I still had a very arrested development element of myself that I didn't really consider myself a true adult yet. I thought of myself as kind of like an adult child, and thus I didn't really have responsibility for other people's feelings. And once I grew up, really grew up, emotionally grew up, then I realized, wow, what I did was actually really horrible. Similar to all of us, I would think, when we think back, if you can remember, to the kinds of shenanigans that you did when you were young, then you might feel bad about what you did. So, you know, like for me, there's a videotape of me at Christmas, and my parents were giving me a trumpet because I played the trumpet. And I don't know, I was probably 12 years old. And my parents weren't rich. And so to buy me a brand new trumpet, because I had been renting a trumpet up until that point from the music store, for them to buy me, like, I don't know, it's probably like a couple $100. And it was fancy. It had kind of a golden, a brassy looking horn on it. But anyway, it was a real cool trumpet. And I was really happy to get it, but they were filming me while I was getting the trumpet, and I was insecure about being filmed. And I was a total snot to my parents because they were like, you know, in my head, I was like, I love it. But they wanted me to play it on the video camera. And I was like, I don't want to play it. And when I watch it, I just cringe. I just feel so bad. And I've apologized to my parents a billion times. But when I look back at that, I think, what was going on in my head? Why was I like that? Well, I was 12 and I hadn't matured yet, and I didn't have a sense of morality or a sense of other people's feelings or a sense of how to guess what's going on in other people's minds or a sense of regulating my own issues or having enough self-esteem to stand on to regulate my own issues. And so we expect a 12-year-old to be snotty sometimes. And so, you know, God bless you people who grew up after me where you were filmed all the time. I mean, I hope you never have to see yourself like that. Maybe it's therapeutic to see yourself like that. Video cameras were basically made for home use when I was like 12 years old. My dad was right on top of it, and it was great, but it's bad for for that particular moment. Anyway, so if you are dependent and you grow up and you retain that arrested development state, you could be 35 years old and still basically feel as if you're a 12-year-old or a 7-year-old on the inside in relation to your responsibility to other people. And then through therapy, 10 years of therapy, then you could look back at 45 and look back at your life when you were 35, and it's the same feeling as what non-dependent people will look back at their 12-year-old or their 10-year-old person and go like, man, I really lacked a moral compass back then, or man, I really didn't realize the effect that I had on other people. But that's normal because I was 10. But when you're 45 and you look back in 35, it can feel bad. But, you know, in therapy, it hopefully can move beyond from that shame. People develop those personalities not in a vacuum. They develop it in relation to the way they're being treated. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
The relationship, you know, has had a lot of ups and downs, and, you know, Azan breaking his promises and, you know, acting the way that he did. But also, you know, even though he did things, you know, I wasn't innocent.
You know, we have to do our best. You know, we should work on that, really, because I see that it's really bad, like we're fighting all the time, and you know, we shouldn't be like this, especially if we decide to get married. We have to change that.
So I hear this all the time on this show, is we have to work on it. We have to change. And that's great. But how? Without a couples therapist, I don't imagine it's going to go well, which it often doesn't on this show. In fact, I don't know if it's ever gone well on the show. Maybe it has, but the stuff that I've seen. So I wish that couples would say, and maybe he will, we need to go to a couples therapist, or we need to read some books on how couples get along better. Most people just say, well, we just have to talk about it more and we have to change. And I'm here to tell you that does not work usually. It's what we call white knuckling it. It's like, well, if I just put more effort into it, then it'll get better. Well, that implies you weren't putting effort into it in the beginning. You were putting effort into it in the beginning, and it's still, you know, spun out of control. In fact, now it's harder for you to control your conflict because now you have traumas that you've done to each other. You know, you had your own traumas. So before Azan and Nicole met, they had their own traumas in the past that they would trigger. You know, they would trigger their own individual traumas from the past. Well, now they've traumatized each other. So the next fight they get in, they're going to trigger the traumas that they did to each other just last week. So it's going to make it even harder for them to white knuckle it. That's why things tend to spin out of control. The longer these things go on, the bigger the fights get, as we have actually seen on the show. Her physical violence as one marker of how bad things are getting. She didn't do this in the first fight, but now she's doing it this fight. And how much worse is it going to get? So what I'd love to hear them say is, well, let's seek outside help one way or the other. Let's see what they say.
I promise that when I go home that I'm really going to try to, like, be better with myself, and, like, hopefully, you know, when you come, I'll do my best not to be short-tempered.
So that's fantastic that she's saying that. I don't know how much Azan is going to trust that. And I don't suspect it's going to go that well unless a clinician is involved. It's just my opinion.
I hope so. Because this is not about just like 2 months, I think it's about forever. Like if you want to live with someone like forever. We have to change that, you know, especially for me, you know, we have to do that.
Me and Azan have a lot of problems right now, but I really hope that Azan still wants to go through the K-1 visa with me, because I really want to give our relationship a chance and see it go through.
I'm sure things will be fine.
So it's great that they're optimistic about the future. He's saying, I'm sure things will be fine. That's great. Optimism is fantastic. But that alone doesn't usually carry the day. So the fight that they had previous to this conversation was so severe and violent that I am very much worried about this couple.
Yeah, we'll work on it and make it good.
So it's great. They're holding hands. They're optimistic. They're expressing their desire to, their dedication to their relationship. That those are all good things if they want their relationship to work out. Again, I'm just worried that it's not going to go well unless they have someone to help them, or at least a book to read. Like I said, you can buy a book. You can buy used books on Amazon for like a penny, and you just have to pay for shipping. Books like anything by John Gottman or Sue Johnson, by the way. Sue Johnson writes about emotionally focused therapy, and John Gottman writes about his own research regarding couples. Those books are good places to start. And like I said, I'm pretty sure on Amazon right now you could buy the John Gottman books anyway for a penny, and you'd maybe like $3 for shipping or something. Anyway. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining me out there. Please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.